You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And I want to say just a few brief words at the top of the show about the First Amendment. You remember the First Amendment. You may have to strain to recall it, but you remember it. There's been quite a flapdoodle lately about The Late Show and comedians in general and their violation of free speech, when actually they were using the First Amendment in precisely the way that it is intended. James Madison put it into the conversation and the Constitution for the specific reason of protecting political speech. It is not there to protect violent pornography, much as the boys would like you to think that, and much as it's often been used that way lately. It was not there for that reason. It was not there for any trivial reason. It was there so you could criticize the king and not be drawn and quartered for it. So actually, this particular comedian was using it in precisely the right ways. And in the topsy-turvy, upside-down world of Trump, that got him into big trouble, of course. Well, that brings us to pornography, and that, in turn, brings us to our guest today. Today we have a very welcome return guest. We have a recidivist, Judith Giesberg. Judith Giesberg is a historian and the Robert M. Birmingham Chair in the Humanities at Villanova University. She's the author of several books on the Civil War era, examining such subjects as women's relief work during the conflict, how working-class and African-American women endured the struggle on the Northern home front, and the trade in, yes, pornography among U.S. Army soldiers. Dr. Giesberg has also produced and overseen a number of digital projects focused on African-American communities during the war and post-war period. And among them is Last Seen. It's an effort to collect and to digitize information such as want ads taken out by formerly enslaved people who were searching everywhere for loved ones who had been lost in the domestic slave trade. And she was last on this podcast discussing that book. Today she's back to talk about a slightly earlier version of hers, a slightly earlier book, in fact, Sex and the Civil War. Soldiers, Pornography, and the Making of American Morality. So, we have that. Plus, we have a surprise. You know, over the years, I have cited fighting words at the end of the program, over and over, quite a bit. Well, now I've decided to stir things up somewhat. So, sometimes that slot will be filled by heartening words, or by reflective or meditative words. And fighting words, too. We'll see. But today, I think we might go with heartening words. Yeah. So stay tuned for that. That's right after my special conversation with Judith Giesberg, with whom I will return in just a moment. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Judith Giesberg, welcome to Women's Media Center Live. Welcome back, because you were here once already.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah, you were here recently, not too long ago, on a new book of yours, which had just come out, which was also fantastic, which is called Last Scene, and it is the story of how you accessed what are hundreds of thousands of drawings and letters and advertisements placed by members of the Freedom Generation after slavery they were published in newspapers and in flyers and all over the place to compile you compile these individuals and their families' stories in a narrative form, and that's the first time that's ever been done, and those voices are incredible. So I recommend that book too, Sex and to Sex and the Civil War, which is the one we're going to talk about today, which is the Civil War. I'm so fascinated by this because really it redefined human relations of the most intimate sort, including, surprisingly, the regulation of sex and reproduction. And this was most evident in the Comstock laws, in a federal law, and a series of state measures that outlawed pornography and contraception and abortion. So the minute you opened one box about sexuality, apparently, all the others sprang open, um, and the anti-everything people rushed in to say no, 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 no to pretty much everything they could. So tell us about sex and the Civil War.
Sure. Yeah. So, like you, I had learned about the Comstock laws when I first began studying women's history and understood, the significance of this cluster of state laws and then the federal law in 1873 that was so incredibly consequential for women and their control over their reproductive lives.
Mm,
Uh, I was very surprised to learn. And I knew who Comstock was.
yeah.
I was very surprised to learn that he was fought in the Civil War and that there was a Civil War story that had not been told. About the origins of this post-war effort to control women's reproduction. And so the book is an exploration of the effort that emerged during the US Civil War to control men's access to erotic materials that resulted in a law that Congress passed in the fourth year of the Civil War in 1864, that was intended to control the circulation of these erotic materials among the Union troops.
Mm.
And, and that law was presented to Congress and debated and passed as an effort to ensure that the Union Army would win the war. And so they saw pornography as something that, that was that could potentially sink the war effort, and that the Union might lose the war if men had access to these erotic, or continued to have access to these erotic materials.
But they wanted to have it both ways, interestingly enough, I think, because you say that these erotica stories offered up women's bodies as a means of male bonding, because they needed to do that for the Civil War, and at the same time, um, the certainly in the wake of it, and in Comstockian days, we must explain to new listeners, who Anthony Comstock was. The congressmen were worried about how to perceive and preserve the sovereignty of husbands over wives,
Right.
fathers over children, even as they sought to dissolve that of masters over slaves. So they wanted it both ways in a strange thing. And it was a whole crisis in masculinity, wasn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
manliness and honor and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yes. So, right. And so this, this anti-pornography measure passed by, men in Washington really had little effect on, the hundreds of thousands of men fighting throughout the country in the war. It didn't do anything to control the access to erotic materials. But the foundation of this law and the infrastructure that was put in place during the war became incredibly useful in that post-war moment you were just describing, more, Robin, with, when there was great concern about, about the sort of unbalanced gender relations that had emerged from the war, and so the law, this law that started as something to control men's sexuality, or men's erotic imaginations, I should say, became, really became useful as a way to control access to, birth control and information about one's body, and of course, abortion.
Right.
And also, right, it was folded into conversations about concerns about women's greater access to divorce, and all sorts of ways in which Americans in the post-war era looked to the state, really, sort of a bulked up, newly energized state to correct, or to resurrect patriarchy, really to put it back into place, with more sort of state power.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and it went into every area. I mean, it was marriage, it was reproduction, it was, you're right, with the integrity of white male agency no longer opposed to slavery, white masculinity required new ground on which to be set off, and that ground was marriage, and drove Comstock. Let's tell people who Comstock was in a brief bit.
Yeah, Anthony Comstock began. He was, his sort of beginning of his life was pretty remarkable. His brother enlisted. He was born and raised in Connecticut. His brother enlisted in the Civil War and died in the war, and like others, of his sort of middle class upbringing, he then enlisted after his brother to sort of replace his brother, and so he joined the Civil War late in the war. It didn't see a lot of fighting, really. He mostly served in the capacity of guarding forts, and had an undistinguished military career. But what he did discover during the war was an organization called the United States Christian Commission, which was an alliance of evangelical pastors, ministers, who were self-appointed guardians of the morality of these young men who had enlisted in the army. And that alliance, Comstock would turn that alliance to good use when the Christian Commission lobbied Congress to pass that 1865 law,
Mhm.
and then turned that initial success into this much more ambitious effort to get federal legislation passed. And so that alliance with the Christian Commission, and earlier the YMCA, which those two organizations really were allied during the war, turned out to be a powerful lobbying force to get Comstock appointed in charge of the post office, where he would administer this 1873 federal effort that outlawed the mailing of erotic materials through the United States Postal Service. And then, as we were just talking about just a moment ago, Robin, added to that list was any information, that women could use to control their own reproductive health. Yeah, and also then, that law was used to target abortion providers.
Right, right. Among the items now prohibited under New York state law was, quote, any article or medicine for the prevention of contraception or producing an abortion. And you say the linking of pornography and abortion began in this post-war moment. And it is incredible. It is absolutely, it clicks into place. It just is remarkable. And New York's law took inspiration from Maryland's law, but it tied pornography closely to abortion, setting a precedent that would be followed closely by other states. And this all built on the growing sense that obscene materials, that is, pornography, even of the most innocuous sort, that pornography was a threat. And proponents of those laws, like federal lawmakers, saw obscenity everywhere. You know, and we
Right.
are still interested. You didn't write a feminist book. You wrote a historian's book because that's what you are, and that's what the book is, and it's fine history indeed in an area that has not been covered before. But its feminism comes through in the way that you relate to the family, and you show how the notion of a certain kind of manliness and honor came into play during this time,
Mm-hmm.
and a femininity also as beginning to come in as the Wicked Witch of the West, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
and I would never have thought to link it to the Civil War. I want to recommend something to you. This I'm linking two guests here. Gail Dines, Dines, is the genius behind. She's a Brit, and she is behind Culture Reframed, which if you just Google it,
Yeah.
it'll come up, and it is a current day website and movement and effort of feminists to point out what pornography, particularly violent pornography, does in fact to young males. And
Yeah, I just called it up. Thank you.
aha,
Yeah.
and it is she is such a smart person. She's very smart. She's very compassionate. She's very, she keeps saying, they say we're kids' worst enemy, but actually we're kids' best friend. She
Yeah.
is just the opposite of what you would think. And she also is focusing now on what it does to young boys, because of
Mm,
what it does is a horrendous warping of their sexuality, and
yeah.
it grooms them. It teaches them this is what sex is.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the next thing you know, kids are saying that choking is the hot new thing. And she's
Oh,
thinking, what? Um,
oh.
so I want to connect you two, because I think that your book should be part of her arsenal, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is that's really important work to be done, and it's so awful the way, yeah, that what you describe, and how, and just how much more difficult it is to control access to that, or to sort of, for parents to police access to the kind of stuff that kids are consuming is just
And
uh yeah.
in an internet age, my God,
Yeah.
it's just impossible. It is
Yeah.
literally. And the internet has not been helpful on this. So
Yeah.
it's a very real problem, and she's been running to stay abreast of it. And she's been at this, I think, for a good 10 years, 15 years, something like that. And she's just inspiring and very sensible. You can look up, in fact, her interview, which was done not too long ago, from
Oh yeah, I will. Yeah.
in the same archive. Um, and and go from there. But and women, what did women do about this during this period? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. I say in the book that the work that I've done is really before this book, and after this book has been really focused on on understanding women's experiences during this time, and to really rethink this period of time with women's with women's experiences at the center of it. And this book is interesting because there's not, it's more about the men and the sort of imaginary women that they bring into the camps in the form of all sorts of images and words. But in the post-war era, interestingly, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, figures into this to this narrative because of the timing of the law that Comstock, that empowers Comstock to do the work that he does. Right. It was founded, the Women's Christian Temperance Union was founded the same year, and it becomes really super powerful in the post-Civil War era. It's in some ways, much more powerful, or much, has much more, reach throughout the country than suffrage does in those early years.
Much more, yeah,
much more, and yet. There's and in some ways, right, that one of their campaigns is to sort of rescue women from prostitution.
Oh yeah, there's the big rescue moment, the Ivanhoe,
right?
What I call the Ivanhoe moment.
Yeah. But they, their focus was really on women as the victims, right?
Oh yeah, and what it meant to be manly and to be a man, and how boys go about becoming men. This was openly debated, because then they were going to rescue women from these sins, the sinful life that they had fallen into.
Yeah, and also rescue women from abusive, alcoholic husbands, and and all of that. So, but whereas Comstock and his efforts never saw women as the victims. It was always these.
They were the perpetrator. They were the carriers.
Yes. They were the threat, or they were the, that just sort of the power of their images could betray the United States military, or and so I think that's an interesting contrast between these two efforts, which on the surface might look like they were natural allies, really weren't in the way they in their approach to sort of combating sin in the post-war era, where the temperance activists really placed women and children at the center of their efforts at rescue, where Comstock was all about boys.
And that's so interesting too, that with the emphasis on young males, which is on one hand expectable, but on the other hand, they're still doing it today. I notice that in the newspaper they will say 5 youths attacked such and such woman in such and such place, and youths will always be male. Youths is not ever female youth. When it is, they specify that, and that's a very different kind of description. But youth is something that we apply to young males, and
so interesting. Yeah,
and almost exclusively to young males.
Yeah, and it almost sounds as if somehow
that it's everybody.
Yeah, right. It's universal, but also, are we then sort of giving them a pass for the behavior that we're about to describe, or is it
exactly? Yeah, it's very, very strange. It isn't strange at all, because you can see through it, but some people don't see through it.
That reminds me of this book that you might be familiar with. It's called Of Age, and it's about boy soldiers. It's during the Civil War, by Francis Clark and Rebecca Plant.
No, I don't know it, but
it's very interesting. In the ways that they describe the phenomenon of underage male soldiers during the Civil War, and the ways in which the media, portrayed them, and the ways in which the two different governments approached these boys, and your really astute observation about the use of the term youth is very interesting. I think that the term is a sort of amorphous way to maybe describe adolescence at the time,
But there's a meaning behind it. There's a real, there's a method to their madness.
Yeah.
And you wrote, Comstock spent decades haunting down men who intended to corrupt, quote, the young person, except that the young person was always a boy.
Yeah.
And his campaign marks the moment that Americans became alerted to the problem of pornography, when pornography was linked in the American imagination with boys and young men. And it still is. And it still is,
Yeah. And it also, something that I've thought a lot about since I wrote this book was really about how much there is in this story about changing ideas about childhood and children and adolescence too. And just, the sort of, the sort of male worlds in which, in the mid 19th century, where there were a lot of mixed age groupings of men and women too, but men in politics and mixed ages in schools and colleges and places like that. And then, of course, into the army, right? There's same sort of mixed age groupings of these men, and then the sort of manifestation of this, older man's concern for these young men's sexuality and their, or their erotic imaginations.
Right, exactly. It makes me wonder how much homoeroticism was in this. I mean, how in older men decided to mentor so carefully younger men.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's part of it as well. And that, of course, makes the women in some of these erotic materials doubly, they couldn't be more sort of peripheral to the, and potentially subverting the sort of experience that these that one imagines in this all male world.
That's right. Yeah. Although they are being dangled as the bait. I mean, that's the double whammy. That is so amazing about it. Wow, it's a very good book. It is called Sex and the Civil War: Soldiers, Pornography, and the Making of American Morality. The story of how pornography in the Civil War shaped American morality. And it did, from the structure of the family, being patriarchal, straight on up through laws made in Washington and beyond. And it's a very powerful and important book, and particularly for those feminists who are interested in fighting violent pornography. And, of course, Last Scene is Judy Giesberg's other book, more recent book, about the families in Freedom Generation who were seeking their lost relatives. These are wonderful books, Judy, and I congratulate you on both of them, and on the more that you're going to write, and you come back and talk to us about them when you do. Yes?
Oh my gosh, I would be honored. Thank you.
All right. Well, take care. Thank you again, and thank you for this good, interesting stuff about the Civil War and about pornography and about sex and about women and about life. And thank you.
Thank you, Robin. This is a pleasure.
We have to take a brief pause here, but I'll return directly with some heartening words. Stay tuned. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman. Nope. It's the meteorite Ticas in Brazil. This is drawn from an article in the New York Times with text by Sam Covey and photographs, wonderful photographs by Dado Galdieri, about an all-female research group, As Meteoriticas, who scour the South American countries, Brazil that is, interior, aiming to preserve meteorites for scientific study and public display. And wow, are they something else? So Mr. Gomez, who is just a plain person who has some territory, and he says it came sounding like a plane. I was afraid of touching it. I didn't know what it was, but he knew it was valuable. Everybody told him so. And the hunters who came knocking in the online forums. And even a collector from Sao Paulo who offered him cash. Then, in May, he was visited by Elizabeth Zuccolotto and Elisa Rocha, both of them geologists and members of As Meteoriticas, an all-female team of scientists devoted to preserving and expanding Brazil's national meteorite collection. The group, whose core members also include Amanda Tosi, an astrochemist, and Diana Paula Andrade, an astronomer, journey to far-flung regions to recover fallen space rocks and educate local communities about their scientific significance. So, over coffee, Dr. Zuccolotto and Dr. Rocha examined the stony meteorite, which is slightly larger than a tennis ball and weighs about 6 ounces. And the two geologists say it's a chondrite composed of ancient cosmic dust and tiny molten droplets. And these formations are among the oldest solid materials in the solar system. Dr. Zuccolotti and Dr. Rocha said that before the meeting, they were very relieved to have found the meteorite, yet uneasy about whether Mr. Gomez would part with it for a price they could afford. "We're not trying to take anything from you," Dr. Zuccolotti said. "We're trying to keep it here, in Brazil, in Goiás, for science, for everyone who needs it for research." Now, before visiting Mr. Gomez to negotiate the price of the meteorite, Zuccolotti and Rocha stopped at a local school, where their mission was to bring meteorites and the cosmos to classrooms as part of a government-funded science outreach program. To show them what a meteorite is, Dr. Rocha said, so that if one falls in their yard, they'll know it's not just money, it's knowledge. The geologist displayed several specimens on 3 plastic tables, and Rocha held a chondrite to a magnet, and the boy flinched as the stone clicked forward. A girl gasped at another space rock fragment. "It's from an asteroid?" the girl said. Dr. Rocha nodded. "Older than any fossil you have ever seen," she said. Before leaving, the scientists hosted a quiz, rewarding students with prizes of star and heart-shaped amulets containing flecks of meteorite. One student proved to be a star pupil. "What's Earth's core made of?" Rocha asked. "Iron and nickel," came a voice. Inarana Rice smiled before reaching timidly for her prize. "How long does sunlight take to reach the Earth?" Dr. Zuccolotti asked. 8 minutes, Ianara replied. "What's the place that most meteorites would probably fall?" Dr. Rocha asked. "The ocean?" came the reply. And Zuccolotti and Rocha handed her another star-shaped prize. Unlike the United States, which regulates the ownership and collection of meteorites, Brazil lacks clear laws. Discoveries on private land default to the landowners, but public land remains a gray area where collectors and foreign buyers are often allowed to outbid scientists for these cosmic treasures. The debate around meteorite ownership in Brazil reignited in August 2020. More than 175 pounds of meteorites fell from the sky over Santa Filomena in Pernambuco. That's a state in Brazil, Pernambuco, setting off a gold rush for space rocks. Discoveries on private land default to the landowners, but public land remains a gray area where collectors and foreign buyers are often allowed to outbid scientists for these cosmic treasures. The debate around meteorite ownership in Brazil reignited in August 2020. More than 175 pounds of meteorites fell from the sky over Santa Filomena in Pernambuco state, setting off a gold rush for space rocks. One was an 84-pound chondrite. The ancient specimen was estimated to have formed 4.56 billion years ago and contained rare minerals like troilite. Residents swiftly gathered fragments that some sold for thousands of dollars, causing a frenzy that drew collectors from around the world. And scientists in the country raised the alarm over the loss of crucial research material. Zucoloto and Totosi flew in from Rio de Janeiro, more than 1,000 miles away. They met a local bar owner who presented another specimen, a rare chondrite that was black with conical grooves and burnt orange streaks. Most chondrites look the same, black, dull, nothing special, Dr. Tosi said, but this one's features made it a masterpiece. Then the race escalated. Foreign speculators began arriving, offering cash, buying aggressively. The town spiraled into a full-blown meteorite fever. Children and adults roamed the streets with homemade metal detectors built from broomsticks and magnets. Each night, the meteoriticas saw new photos circulating online, pile of cash flaunted by rival buyers. It felt like a crude way to use wealth to win people over, pulling poor farmers away from the scientists. She felt that the two were at a disadvantage because we are women, she added. A collector from the United States bought the masterpiece rock from the bar owner. After negotiations that included the director of the National Museum in Rio, an agreement was reached to transfer the stone to the museum, but only if the meteoriticas reimbursed the buyer for about $3,200. The scientists scrambled. Zucoloto called her son in Rio and asked him to fly in with the cash. She and Tosi then raced through back roads, stopping at one bank branch after another to withdraw the rest. These are heroic women. In the end, they managed to secure the cash and to acquire the meteorite for Brazil. It's now on display in Rio, with smaller fragments stored for study at the Federal University of Goiás. And after the scramble in Santa Filomena, Rodrigo Vesule, a space law researcher, and the meteoriticas started a campaign to prevent further losses of Brazil's scientific heritage. Working with the Brazilian Geological Society, Mr. Vesule is pushing for legislation that would classify meteorites as national scientific assets, regulating but not prohibiting their trade. The proposal draws from mining laws, museum policies, and international space treaties to create enforceable, balanced rules. It's not about confiscation, Vesule says, but about creating legal certainty and promoting responsible stewardship. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on social media at The Robin Morgan. You can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net, and you can find my new novel, Parallax, and my just-out new book of poems, Harvesting Darkness, wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer, as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer for this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us next time on Women's Media Center Live.